Here's a question from Christopher Sally. What do you see as Kevin Bauman's role in the offense next year with Tremble going to the NFL? I think Kevin Bauman is going to be in a battle for that number 2 tight end spot, and I think, and then at that point in time, it becomes, if you're in the battle for number 2, you're also in the battle for number 3, and I think Notre Dame's going to use 3 tight ends again, and there's certainly a reason for that and good call for that. And to me, I think Kevin Bauman's in that conversation. I've heard a lot of good things about him. I've heard his development has been good. He's a good blocker. He's a good pass catcher. He's not the athlete that maybe a Michael Mayer is. He's not as big as Michael Mayer. Or excuse me, he's not the athlete Tommy Tremble was. He's not as big as Michael Mayer. He's a good football player, and he's going to have a chance to win that number 2 job. Now, it's going to be tough because you've got George Takis on campus. You've got Kane Barong coming in as a true freshman. I've heard he's adjusted really well and is looking really good. So it's going to be a battle, but I think Kevin Bauman is not going to step in and just do exactly what Tommy Tremble did. But I think he's a guy that could do some of the things that Tommy Tremble did. He's a guy that has a body type you could move around, play in a wing, maybe put as a fullback, and he's a good blocker. I don't know if he's the punishing blocker that Tommy Tremble was, but not many people are. There's no one else in the draft class anywhere that has his ability to block. So, I think battling for that number 2, number 3 role is going to be where he is now. The reason I'm not being specific is, as the number 2 tight end, Christopher, he would be more of a multi-use player, a tradition, because then sometimes he'll be in as the number 1 when you're giving Mayer a breather. And in that role, he has to be more of a true tight end, line up, run all the route package, block, and those kind of things. If he's the number 3 tight end, then his role will be more limited. It'll be more of a Brock Wright type of role. So that's the reason I'm not saying what I think that role will be. It just depends on whether he's the 2 or the 3. And the 2 will have a more expansive role than the 3 will. I think he probably would be used more to catch the ball than Brock Wright was. But it would still be a very similar role, 15 to 20, 25 snaps a game, short yardage, goal line stuff, and then the occasional, usage out of that. And then, of course, sometimes maybe he's the number 2 in the 2 tight end set when you're giving another guy a breather. Ryan Bonk asks, why are we not talking about Clark? I assume that he's talking about Brendan Clark. Ryan, a big part of the problem is because right now we don't know his health status. And, he's a guy that had knee surgery, I believe, after the season. I don't know what his status is going to be for spring practice. And honestly, I think a big part of it for me, I can't speak for everybody else, but I know for me, it's because as much as I love his physical talent, and look, we did a podcast yesterday previewing the quarterback position. We talked about Brendan Clark. We talked about his skill set. We talked about what he brings to the table. We also talked about sort of the challenges in front of him. I would encourage you to go check that out. But really what it boils down to is, if he's not 100% healthy and ready to go this spring, he's going to get passed up, and it's going to be too far behind to get back in it. That's just the reality. And that should happen at programs like Notre Dame. When you're recruiting the way that you should, guys that get hurt or guys that don't develop fast enough just get passed up. And it's unfortunate for that kid, but that's kind of how it should work for a healthy program. Omar Austin asks, do you think Notre Dame will truly use 2 halfbacks, running backs this season? Omar, I think they will. And the reason I'm more optimistic about that than other things is because, for me, I think we've seen it before under Brian Kelly. 2011, they used Sear Wood and Jonas Gray a lot together, not necessarily at the same time, but they used them both. 2012, we saw a lot of Theo Riddick and Sear Wood. And we even saw some George Atkinson getting mixed in there in normal mix. I mean, there was really 3 backs that you would see when the game was on the line that season. 2015, not as much, but we did see 2 backs. I think that 2015 was different because when Torian Folston got hurt, they didn't have the confidence to use Josh Adams more, which they should have. But they didn't move CJ Prosise to running back to sit the bench and just spell Torian Folston. They moved him to running back in the spring thinking they were going to have a good 1-2 punch with Torian Folston and CJ Prosise. That is something that I know from having conversations with people at the time, that is something that they were certainly looking to do. And so we've seen it at different times where they've used a deeper back. To 2017, they used a deeper rotation. Yes, Josh Adams was the guy, but we saw plenty of Dexter Williams when he was healthy. We saw plenty of Tony Jones when he was healthy. We saw Deion McIntosh step into this to the rotation when those guys got hurt. So it wasn't just a Josh Adams and nobody else situation back then either. So I think we've seen it. I think that we'll see more of it this year, especially now that Chris Tyree is going into year 2. I will be shocked if Notre Dame doesn't doesn't allow Chris Tyree to be a bigger part of the offense while still also emphasizing Kyron Williams. And I think it would even make for a more expanded role for Kyron Williams. I could see look, to me, Kyron Williams could be a better running version of Clyde Edwards-Helaire from LSU. And he went late in the first round. And now I don't know if he'll test as well in the 40 and all that, but Kyron Williams' ability to catch the ball out of the backfield as a traditional running back, to block, he needs a lot of work from a technical assignment standpoint as a blocker. Those are areas where he struggled, but his willingness to block, his power as a blocker is impressive. And then, of course, he's a good runner, but he also now brings an element where you can line him up in the slot and isolate him against safeties and linebackers, and he can do damage as a route runner. So, and then you have Chris Tyree as your running back in those situations. So I think there is a lot of opportunity there with two players, and I'd be shocked if we don't see that.